RFK Jr. stepped into the room and shut the door behind him. The latch closed with a solid click. He picked up the chair that was sitting against the wall and dragged it into the circle of light in the center of the room, its 4 metal feet rasping against the concrete floor as he went. He took off his jacket, revealing his well-muscled frame, barely contained by his crisp white dress shirt. He hung the jacket over the back of the chair, walked around to the front of the chair, rolling up his sleeves as he went, revealing his meaty, hair-covered forearms. He sat down, leaned back, folded his arms across his broad chest, and stared calmly but unwaveringly at the man in front of him. The man in the other chair. "You know who I am?" RFK Jr. asked. The man in the other chair nodded. "You know why I'm here then?" said RFK Jr. The man in the other chair nodded again. Then, with a sharp intake of breath, he spoke. "It was explained to me, but I'm afraid you've fallen victim to a misunderstanding. You see—" "I understand perfectly," RFK Jr. said, cutting the other man off. He leaned forward, placing one bear paw-like hand on his tree trunk thigh. "And the only victim here is you." "You're not the only one who wants answers to your questions," the man in the other chair said. "But those answers may be more complex than you're prepared for. I've devoted years of research to this. I'm a scientist, and the bare walls of the room rang with the sound of the smack RFK Jr. gave him before he could finish what he was trying to say. "Scientists," RFK Jr. growled, contempt practically dripping from the corners of his mouth as he sat back into his chair. "You're all the same. You think you know so much. You don't know shit." The scientist shook off the smack as best he could and righted himself in his chair. He looked at RFK Jr. with his head tilted back and a gleam of defiance in his eye, and then he said, "Then why are you asking me?" RFK Jr. leapt to his feet, grabbed the scientist by the front of the shirt, yanked him up until their faces were barely an inch apart. "I want the cause of autism, you son of a bitch!" RFK Jr. screamed in the scientist's face. RFK Jr.'s eyes were wide, his face flushing red, his neck bulging, his biceps threatening to tear through the fabric of his shirt. He heard the sound from behind him of the door opening. Then he felt hands on his shoulders, pulling him back, and a voice in his ear telling him to back off. He released the scientist and sat down. The man who'd pulled him back was over with the scientist now, calming him, apologizing. The man turned toward RFK Jr. It was Dr. Oz. "Jesus, Bobby," he said. "I thought you said you had this one under control." RFK Jr. stood up suddenly, throwing the chair backwards. It tipped over and clattered against the floor. "It is under control," he insisted between heaving breaths. "Autism, that's what's out of control." "That's an alarmist point of view," said the scientist, leaning to the side to see around Dr. Oz, who was still kneeling in front of him. "The most likely explanation for the seemingly higher incidence of autism is increased awareness and improved diagnostic criteria." "Quiet," Oz told the scientist with a hiss-like whisper. "If he brought me here to learn the truth, then that's what I'm going to tell him," said the scientist. "It's all right, Oz. Take a walk," said RFK Jr., leaning one hand, which was of a size much larger than that of an ordinary man's hand, against the wall. Dr. Oz rose cautiously to his feet. "Don't you think it would be better if I stayed?" "I said take a walk," RFK Jr. said through his teeth. Dr. Oz sighed. "Maybe we'd all feel better if we had something to eat. I'll go to the kitchen and make us a crudité." "Have you ever seen a person with full-blown autism?" RFK Jr. asked after Dr. Oz had left the room and the door was once again closed. "They don't talk. They constantly moan and shriek. They have to wear helmets because they're constantly smashing their head into things. They don't date. They don't use the toilet. They don't have jobs. The scientist shook his head.
The term full-blown autism isn't a clinical diagnosis. The reason we describe autism as a spectrum is because it manifests in a wide variety of ways, and different people with autism benefit from different levels of support depending on their specific circumstances.
Just tell me why you did it, RFK Jr. said, staring at the scientist with his cold, yet intelligent, yet compelling eyes.
Did what? The scientist asked,
seeming confused. Why'd you do it? RFK Jr. asked again.
Why did I do what? Asked the scientist. I didn't do anything.
RFK Jr. started toward the scientist. You, whoever you are. The scientist started to stand, but RFK Jr. said, "Sit down!" And the scientist stayed where he was. The drug companies, the chemical companies, doctors, scientists. He was standing directly in front of the scientist now, so close that his mostly flaccid but still obviously very large and powerful penis was discernible inside his 100% cotton slacks. Why?
I can't answer that because I don't even know what you're asking,
the scientist shouted, trying to cover his fear with forcefulness. He'd barely gotten the last word out when RFK Jr. backhanded him out of the chair. We know the cause must be an environmental toxin, said RFK Jr., a chilling calm in his voice. Genes don't cause epidemics.
It's not an epidemic,
said the scientist, sliding across the floor in the opposite direction as RFK Jr. slowly advanced. Is it the vaccines? Asked RFK Jr.
It almost certainly doesn't have a single cause,
said the scientist. Is it the fluoride? Asked RFK Jr.
It's not a disease,
said the scientist. Is it the fucking worms? Asked RFK Jr.
It may not even be a disorder, said the scientist. It could just be part of the normal, natural variation of human neurodevelopment.
RFK Jr. bent over, grabbed the scientist by the front of the shirt, and yanked him to his feet. It took very little effort for RFK Jr. to do this, because RFK Jr. is very strong. You go back and tell the worms that the one they sent to eat my brain didn't get the job done. You tell him he's dead, and I'm alive, and that's how it's gonna be.
I have rights, pleaded the scientist. There are laws. You can't do this.
I can't do this, RFK Jr. yelled, pushing the scientist up against the wall. I'm the motherfucking Secretary of Health and Human Services. He drove his knee up into the scientist's gut and let him go. The scientist crumpled to the floor.
I know you have good intentions,
said the scientist, gasping for breath.
I know you want people to have better lives. You want them to be healthier, happier.
He looked up at RFK Jr., who was staring down, slowly, shaking his head. I just want them to pay taxes, RFK Jr. said. Then RFK Jr. lifted one foot and kicked the scientist sharply in the jaw, spinning his head around, snapping his neck and killing him instantly. RFK Jr. rolled his sleeves back down over his veiny forearms, which were larger than the calves of most men. Never mind, he said. I'll tell the worms myself. The door opened and Dr. Oz stepped inside. He stood next to RFK Jr. looking down at the body of the scientist, shaking his head disapprovingly. I don't like this, Bobby, said Dr. Oz. I don't like what it's doing to you. Can it, Oz? Snapped RFK Jr. Put this cold meat in the back of my van and get the next one in here. Dr. Oz grabbed the scientist by the feet and started to drag him from the room. RFK Jr. walked over to where his chair had landed after he flung it out from under him. He bent over, picked up his jacket, shook it out, dusted it off. His back was to the door as he pulled the jacket on. RFK Jr. turned his head and said over his shoulder, When you're done with that, finish making that crudité. And no zucchini. They might be genetically modified.